Good day, scholars. We are um, on to Social Studies U.S. History, standard number 10, Reconstruction. And as before, we examined the Civil War. Now we're going to examine the after effects of the Civil War. Last time, of course, we examined not only the Civil War, but we actually examined the causes of the Civil War. Now we're going to see the effects of the Civil War. All right. The essential question here is, how did the legal, political, and social dimensions of Reconstruction lead to its successes and failures? Oh, Reconstruction. After the war, the South needed to be rebuilt, of course, physically, economically, and politically. The Reconstruction was the rebuilding of the systems after the war. And as you can see in these pictures, you can see the remnants of the ruins that were left behind because of the Civil War. Lincoln had a plan for Reconstruction, and it was called the 10% plan. Lincoln began planning for Reconstruction during the war. His plan would be to offer a general amnesty to all Southerners who took an oath of loyalty and accepted the end of slavery. Second, when 10% of the state voters took the oath, the state could organize a new state government. Lincoln's plan was very lenient and was intended to make it easy for the South to rejoin the Union. But something happened, of course. We all should know by this time that Lincoln was assassinated by a gentleman named John Wilkes Booth in a theater. But moving forward. All right, now it brings his vice president, and at this time, the president, Andrew Johnson, and his Reconstruction plan. Johnson became the president after Lincoln's assassination in 1865. Johnson was a Southern Democrat from Tennessee who remained loyal to the Union during the war. Johnson had his own plan for Reconstruction and became known as the Presidential Construction. Now, under Presidential Reconstruction, like Lincoln, Johnson wanted to restore the political status of the southern states as quickly as possible. He offered pardons and restorations to land to mostly Confederates who swore allegiance to the Union and the Constitution. The main requirement is that each state had to ratify the 13th Amendment and create a state constitution that abolished slavery. Presidential construction continued. Johnson resented wealthy planners because he blamed them for starting the war and required that they and other Confederate leaders write him directly and ask for a pardon. He was not in favor of giving African Americans the right to vote, but he supported state rights, and these state rights would be able to limit African Americans' rights, as we'll see in the future. All right, the southern states began to rebuild to their pre-war world, only gave white men the right to vote, and Southern states instituted what they call the Black Codes. Republicans who won the vast majority of seats in Congress in 1866 and began to reverse many of Johnson's plans, as we will see. All right, the radical Republicans, what they call the Congressional Plan for Reconstruction is concerned. The Republicans made a new plan for Reconstruction. The Congress passed the 14th Amendment. They divided the South into 5 military districts governed by a Union general. Almost sound like Hunger Games. They created a process for each Southern state would re-enter the Union. They had to write a new constitution and ratify the 14th Amendment. And also they installed the Republican Party in the South. The plan was much harsher on the South than Lincoln's or Johnson's plan. All right, as we can see, this is the Southern military districts in 1867. As you can see, District 1 was Virginia, District 2 was North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida made up District 3, and District 4 was made of Arkansas, Mississippi, and lastly, we have District 5, and that was made of Texas and Louisiana, but oddly, well, convenient to the president at the time, I guess, no military district was placed in his home state of Tennessee. All right, here we can see that these were officially the first black members of the U.S. Congress. As you can see, we have one senator. That senator is over to your left, Hiram R. Rills of Mississippi, and the rest are House of Representative members. As you can see, Representative Benjamin S. Turner of Alabama, Representative Robert Carlos De La Roche of South Carolina, Representative Josiah T. Walls of Florida, Representative Jefferson F. Long of Georgia, Representative Joseph H. Rainey of South Carolina, and Representative Robert B. Elliott of South Carolina. All right, Johnson impeachment. Congress tries to limit Johnson's power by passing an act that had to have Senate approval to remove certain officials from office. Johnson attempted to fire the Secretary of War, who was a radical Republican in his cabinet. The House of Representatives voted to impeach Johnson, charging him with refusing to uphold the law. Congress came up one vote short of finding Johnson guilty. Johnson remained president, but did not run for re-election in 1868. Just to keep in mind, although a president is impeached, that doesn't necessarily mean that he committed a vile act or a crime. It just means that that's just like a trial of some sort. And although you are impeached, it doesn't necessarily, that's just a process of determining whether the president should be removed from office. Moving forward. Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, known as the Freedmen's Bureau, created before Lincoln's death, in an effort to help former slaves or free men on his march to the sea. General Sherman set aside all abandoned land along the coast for use by former slaves and poor whites. The Bureau was in charge of feeding, clothing, healthcare, and reuniting families. The Bureau also played a major role in establishing schools for freedmen and poor whites. Moving forward. All right, Morehouse College, founded in 1867 by a former slave with the purpose of training free slaves how to read and write. The Civil War Amendments, the 13th Amendment, passed by Congress in 1865. It banned slavery in the United States as part of Reconstruction. Southern states had to ratify the 13th Amendment to rejoin the Union. Passed by Congress in 1866, the 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all people born or naturalized, including former slaves in the U.S. It gave all people the right to due process and equal protection. Southern states had to ratify the 14th Amendment in order to rejoin the Union. And 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870. The 15th Amendment stated that the right to vote cannot be denied on account of race, color, or previous conditions of servitude. In essence, the 15th Amendment granted suffrage to the former slaves. This amendment was opposed by many female abolitionists because it did not extend the right to vote to Indians or women. So, interesting that before women received the right to vote, African Americans were. All right. The Black Codes. Not all white Southerners accepted the equal status of former slaves. After the 13th Amendment, all former slaves states enacted Black Codes, which were laws written to control the lives of freed slaves in ways slaveholders had formerly controlled the lives of their slaves. The Black Codes deprived voting rights to freed slaves and allowed plantation owners to take advantage of black workers in ways that made it seem slavery had not been abolished. All right, the Ku Klux Klan, formed in 1866 in an effort to rid the South of Union troops stationed in military districts. Their goal was to drive out Northerner carpetbaggers and help the Democratic Party regain power in the South. The Klan burned black schools, churches, and communities. All right, as you can see, this is the Ku Klux Klan members, 3 Ku Klux Klan members, and you can see that their sort of symbol to their movement is the burning cross. This, as you can see, was, as you can see, 2 women and a man, members of the Ku Klux Klan, stand near a burning cross at night, probably in Denver, Colorado, but this is 1930, as you can see. So it wasn't just relegated to the South in some forms. Interpreting a political cartoon. Just take a minute to look at this cartoon. maybe hit that pause button and ask yourself these questions. As you can see, what two things does the donkey represent? Um, are the people hanging, who are the people hanging from the tree? Excuse me. Just keep that in mind as we talked about that. Carpetbaggers uh, looking to install the Democratic Party, which is, you know, um, symbol is a donkey, a mascot is a donkey. Moving forward, moving forward. All right. Enforcement Acts, 1870, 1871. The acts made it a federal offense to interfere with the right to vote and use the acts to indict hundreds of Klansmen in the South and brought an end to the Klan until its rebirth in the 1920s. Ways to limit African American rights. All right, they had a few different ways, and it wasn't actually limited to these three different ways, but they were uh, done more consistently. You have poll tax. Uh, Blacks had to pay to vote. Then you had literacy tests. They had to read and write on a test to vote. As there was also some instances where they tried to make them quote the Declaration of Independence or sing the Star Spangled Banner completely to be able to vote. It was many different things that many different ploys that they tried to use as ways to prevent African Americans from voting. Also, you had violence. African Americans were attacked and violently beaten on the way to polls as well. All right, the presidential election of 1876. Um, the election of 1876. Republican Rutherford B. Hayes and Democrat Samuel Tilden. Disputed election results in 3 states provided no candidate with a majority of electoral votes. The House of Representatives failed to choose a president due to party politics. As a result, Congress specially chose an election commission to reach a compromise. All right, continue. The results of the 1876 election. Democrats would concede the election of 1876 if Republicans would agree to remove remaining troops from the South. The Compromise of 1870 officially ended Reconstruction as President Rutherford B. Hayes removed the troops from the South. All right, that concludes our lecture for today. Make sure you take a look at this more than one time, maybe, to make sure that you really understand some of the concepts and some of the action that happened during Reconstruction for your test on Friday. Contact me. You know you can contact me. The best way is to remind. You can always email me, call me on my desk phone, or even on my classroom phone. But you'll have to dial that extension 11103. As always, any emails received after 3:30 or I will get back to you all on the following work day. If it's a Friday, of course, you know I won't get back in contact with you till probably sometime around Monday morning. All right, tutorial is always available on Wednesdays, 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Or you can set an individual session with me Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. That time would be 1:30 150 to 330. Just make sure you contact me and set a appointment with me. All right. Other than that, that's all I have for this lecture. All right. Thank you guys for listening, and hope you all have a great day. All right, scholars.